I look around and you have to ask yourself the question, what gives me the credentials? Why am I suited for this office? So let me give you a little historical perspective of me. First of all, I am a small business owner. I've created, like I said, about 50 jobs over the years. I create many more than that because every time I get, over the last 15 years, every time I get a sale, I have a company in Billerica that builds certain parts. I've got a company in Wilmington that does all the prints and the drafting. I've got companies in Woburn. I've got companies in Dracut that supply all the parts, in Concord that supplies more. North Carolina provides membranes. I have systems welded together by companies in Lowell, by companies up in New Hampshire, final assembly in St. Louis, in Michigan, in Atlanta, Georgia, and then it goes ultimately to wherever we're going to install the system. So every time I get a job, I'm able to farm out this work, and it's good for these companies because it gives them extra work. They've already met their overhead, so it gives them some extra capital with which to do work. We all put our pieces of pie in, and we make a bigger pie, and we're able to prosper that way. That's the American way. You have to be ingenious. You have to figure out new ways to go against the bigger corporations. So that's on my resume, job creation. I clean water for a living. There's so much, we have so much worries about the environment. The environment is precious to us. We're on a planet. So 25 years ago, I started cleaning water. To this day, I still clean water. Now, what does that mean? Not to bore you with the details, but I do a lot of work in manufacturing companies, printed circuit boards, semiconductors, mining operations, places that build product, places that take something and create value out of what they make. Now, in these processes, they use a lot of different metals. They use a lot of different oils and greases. My systems take the metals out and take the oil and greases out so that you can discharge this water to a stream. The stream ends up going to the Quabbin Reservoir. We drink the water. Why? Because it's got no toxic metals in it. That's what I do. It's fun. Every job is different. They're all unique. One of the talents that I've created is, if you look at the solution, it can be complex, but if you look at how to solve it, you have to put it into very simple pieces. And I've developed a knack for that. It might take 100 steps, an exaggeration, simple steps to solve a problem. That's how you solve it. You break it into smaller and smaller pieces until you can get a handle, until you can understand what's going on. So I'm in tune to the environment. I understand how important it is. I'm also a nuclear engineer. I have a problem pronouncing nuclear. I've been told that I sound like I'm from south of the Mason-Dixon line because, well, that's where I was born, in Texas. So I kind of say nuclear. Please, it is nuclear. It's 3 syllables, I believe. I understand good, clean energy. It is clean. It is safe. We need more of these plants. If you look at job creation and you look at the environment and you look at nuclear engineering, it's very difficult, I'm sorry. It's very difficult to say it like that. If you look at that, we can create so many jobs for so many Americans that are high paying, that are highly technical jobs, the steel that's needed, the pumps that's needed, the controls that are needed to provide energy. And why do we need energy? To grow, to make the pie bigger. That's what people are missing right now. We don't need to decrease the amount of energy we have. We need to increase the amount of energy we have. I'm not going to apologize ever that we are the most prosperous country in the world, that we are the most generous country in the world, that we do that because we provide for the world. We provide for each other because we're Americans. That's what we do. Energy is the lifeblood of our future. It's the lifeblood of our kids' future. Now we experiment. We try things. We tried wind power once upon a time, and this worked really good. John Adams actually got the legislation through because we had an issue over in the Mediterranean Sea. The Constitution and a few other ships were responsible for resolving that issue. But then people came up with steam power, and we advanced. And so this type of ship was replaced with something that was powered by steam, boiling water. You turn a screw and go. It then got replaced with nuclear power versus using coal. We evolve. We've talked about job creation, we've talked about the environment, we've talked about energy. Final issue that I believe makes me qualified to serve is I've served before. We had a war in Vietnam, and at the height of that war, I volunteered and actively sought out an appointment to the United States Naval Academy. I was very lucky. I was listed as a qualified alternate, so they picked 400 names out of the 10,000, 12,000 qualified alternates, and I was one of the 400 that came to the top, so I got to go to the Naval Academy. It was a great experience. I majored in aerospace engineering because at the time I was going to become a pilot. My eyes went bad, so I couldn't become a pilot, so I then ended up becoming a nuclear engineer. What a great program. The engineering is intense, it's detailed, it's amazing to figure out how things really work. Upon commission, I was commissioned as an ensign. At the time I was really good looking. That was one of the requirements for being an officer in the Navy. Had a full set of hair. Contrary to what people may say, I did not lose the hair from nuclear power, okay? I think it's a genetic thing. But I commissioned the USS Virginia, a cruiser. I served as an electrical officer, so at age 23 I had about 125 electricians working for me. You real quick learn that you are surrounded by people with a lot of expertise. These people happen to be the senior chiefs and the master chiefs. You let them run things and you just knock down doors if they need a door knocked down. You can do that because you're an officer in the Navy. But that went really well. A lot of exciting things happened, a lot of different problems solved, a lot of organizational skills learned. And then I was lucky, I went to my home state, the USS Texas, where I was the navigator. And navigator is kind of like the navigator on the USS Constitution. Get from point A to point B and make sure you don't go aground. It was fun being on the bridge of a ship in the middle of hurricanes. Some people might not say that was fun, but for me, it was the ultimate roller coaster ride. But I digress. I've served before. I took an oath at the Naval Academy to preserve and defend the Constitution. When I graduated, I took an oath to preserve and defend the Constitution. This document. This is a mini version of the document. We the people. A wonderful preamble in order to make a more perfect union. And it goes on to talk about justice, to talk about welfare, the general welfare, to talk about the common defense. Very positive ideals that come together. I know what this document says. That's where we need to go back to, is looking at this document and following it. It amazes me that two groups came together, and this is why we need more balance in Congress. Two groups came together to make this document. We talk about bipartisanship. Well, this document was bipartisan only because neither of the two camps ever backed down. You had the camp that wanted a federal government, they didn't back down. And you had a camp that wanted states' rights, they didn't back down. And in the end, you had Roger Sherman, a cobbler from Connecticut. He fixed shoes. He wasn't a lawyer, he fixed shoes. He came up with the Connecticut Compromise that both the people that wanted a federal government, a strong federal government, and those that wanted a strong states' rights could both say, that's our plan. Now that's true bipartisanship. Both sides were partisan until they could come to a compromise that they could both embrace. Can you imagine the course of our country if both sides, Democrats and Republicans, stood for principle and hammered it out until they could come to compromises in our law that they could both equally embrace? That's what I'm asking for, is a chance to go to Washington, D.C., to be part of that argument, to be part of that balance, to stand for principle, and to come to a conclusion. Now there's a backside to this. I said sometimes we want government to help us a lot.